don't understand even our modern day. I used to teach during the 90s. And kids used to come up to me and said, 90s were a pretty good time. Stock market was going through the roof. And there was a lot of prosperity, and people felt rich, and unemployment was historical lows. And people used to come to me and say, who's responsible for these good times? Is it Bill Clinton? Or is it Alan Greenspan? Right? Those are the choices. And I used to say, it can be a politician. Right? It can be a politician. The best they can do, the best a politician can do is get barriers out of the way. But they don't actually create anything. Barriers out of the way for whom? It's the people who actually create the stuff that count. And it can't be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Because again, you can ask me about this, but all the Federal Reserve, all the central bank can do is be destructive. It cannot actually be productive. So who created the prosperity of the 1990s? And some will say, well, it was Ronald Reagan and so on. Again, politicians. That can't be the answer. The name I gave for the prosperity of the 1990s, and I stand by it, is a guy who got sentenced to 10 years in jail for trumped up charges. A guy who had to apologize for being a successful financier. A guy who's back of Rudolph Giuliani made a political career. And that person is Michael Milken. I don't know how many of you remember Michael Milken, one of my personal heroes. Michael Milken made it possible during the 1980s to completely restructure the American economy. It is stunning to look at economic numbers, not economic numbers at the macro level, but at the micro level. To look at American companies, to look at their efficiency, to look at how they produced and what they made, and how awful they were in the 1970s, and how uncompetitive they were in the 1970s. And then fast forward to the 1990s and look at those same companies. Or if they didn't exist, which most of them didn't exist, look at them anew. And what made that transformation is Michael Milken and people like Michael Milken. I mean, where did Silicon Valley come from in the 1980s? How did so much capital show up in Silicon Valley in the 1980s? This is the era of the PC. This is the era of early Steve Jobs. This is the era of Bill Gates. This is the era of Larry Ellison and Sun Microsystems and all the what now are considered relatively old technology companies. But that really changed America. It was private equity firms. It was leveraged buyouts. It was Michael Milken unleashing the capitalists on the old industries that were not productive, that were wasteful, shutting them down. But capital doesn't go to waste. Where did the capital go to? It went from the Rust Belt to Silicon Valley. The capital was redeployed from wasteful production to futuristic, wealth-creating, innovative production. Silicon Valley was made possible by the Rust Belt shutting down, by shifting capital to its most productive use, which is what finance and financiers do so well. You cannot understand America's success economically over the last 30 years without understanding what Milken and the hostile takeover artists, like Carl Icahn, who's still around, did during that period. And they are vilified, and they've been criminalized. Milken served in jail, exactly because of their success, their unbelievable success at transforming the American economy from a conglomerate-based economy, unproductive, to a focused, lean, incredibly productive industrial world during the 1990s. Of course, since then, we've passed laws to bring back the 1970s because we like it so much.